It's about the evaluation of the intersection of environmental and fiscal sustainability and the government's role in mitigating climate change while encouraging investor confidence. And we're esteemed to have an incredible high level of panelists today. And I'm also joined by my co-moderator, Aisha Swale. I'll let Aisha Swale introduce the first panelist.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second panel of the day. For our first panelist, I would like to introduce Madam Anne Mubia Murungi from Viva Africa LLP. She is the managing partner and an advocate of the High Court of Kenya, with 15 years of experience advising on transactions, providing a balance between commercial requirements from a business perspective and practical legal, financial, and tax solutions. She was also recognized in a 2021 publication by the KRA as one of Kenya's leading women in the field of taxation. A round of applause for Madam Anne, please.
For our second panelist, he's the executive chairman of a daily group, the director of growth and new markets at affiliate firms, ALN Africa and Middle East, and a board member at Bidco Africa. He's a globally recognized thought leader with 34 years of leadership experience in business strategy, brand leadership, turnaround, integrated business solutions, and investment partnerships. Please welcome Mr. Chris Diaz with a round of applause.
For our third panelist, we have Madam Winnie Ogutu from TISA. She's a program officer. TISA stands for the Institute for Social Accountability. She is also a member of the Agricultural and African Women in Agricultural Research and Development, and her work has focused on empowering youth and women in agriculture, providing them with the necessary skills and resources to thrive. A round of applause for Ms. Madam Winnie Ogutu.
Our fourth panelist is the manager at the Center for Green Growth and Climate Change and Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation at the Kenya Association of Manufacturers. He's a mechanical engineer registered with the Engineers Board of Kenya and has over 9 years experience practicing in the energy field and is accredited by the Certified Energy Manager International by the Association of Energy Engineers and is a Class A licensed energy auditor with the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Please put your hands together for Mr. Dennis Kariuki. Our final panelists for today is partner in charge of finance and strategy and the head of dispute resolution department in Ngeriomiti and Bush Advocates. He holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from Moi University and is a qualified arbitrator and a member of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators. Please welcome Mr. Harman Omiti. Our discussion today is mainly about the green economy and about the intersection of environmental and fiscal sustainability. And today, we are privileged to have a wealth of knowledge from our panelists. And to begin us off, could maybe Mr. Dennis give us his perspectives on the government's view on the green economy and how environmental and fiscal sustainability issues are managed by the government.
So thank you very much for having me on this panel. Sitting here among people who have been in the industry for close to three plus decades, it's a huge honor, and actually just to share experiences and also thoughts about the green economy here in our country. So I'll just start off by saying that the government of Kenya is very deliberate in growing green as an economy. So some of the policies that are already in existence are already supporting that, and they're very deliberate about ensuring that the environment for manufacturing, number one, is growing sustainably. there have been conversations about how it is hard to industrialize using clean strategies, that if Europe, Asia, Americas destroyed the environment to industrialize, then why are we being denied the opportunity? But if you think about it and how we've come as a country, 90% of our energy sources comes from renewable energies. That means that the manufacturers who are using electricity already are a step ahead. The other fuels that are in transport, steel production, cement production that are heavily fossil-based, they're the industries that I say that are hard to decarbonize. But if you look at also the incentives, especially in the transport sector, there's huge incentives around electric mobility, from the two-wheelers, the three-wheelers, the four-wheelers, but they are not being operationalized, these incentives. That is the biggest challenge. And moving forward, I think these are some of the areas I think that the laws are there, but they're not being implemented. They're not being operationalized, yes. And that creates a huge gap for us to actually leapfrog and reach the ambition that we want to achieve as a country, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Just to build on that, maybe Mr. Chris can maybe give us his perspectives on the private sector particularly.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to sincerely thank you for having this opportunity to come and speak and also to meet each one of you from the private sector, which is one of the largest investors in business. Just to give you some statistics for you to understand how big is the private sector and what is its role. The private sector drives 80% of the GDP across the world. So for example, in Kenya or in Africa, you will see the private sector is running businesses in trillions of dollars every year in terms of investments, in terms of entrepreneurship, and in terms of employment, in terms of tax payments to various governments. So one thing that I can say to begin, Jeremy, is that the private sector is very happy and resilient to recruit legal leaders like each one of you. So as much as the private sector, when it thrives, it's looking for superb talent as they continue to expand. Now, considering that Kenya also is going through a very difficult time, and we understand that the private sector is bringing more investors in, not only in Kenya, but across Africa, green technology, especially from sectors such as aviation, manufacturing, are using more cost-driven solutions. At the same time, they're using green strategies. Now, one of the key areas that you'll find the private sector would like to partner with the public sector is to deliver on net zero goals and to deliver on the UN scientific initiatives, and importantly, to deliver on the United Nations Global Compact goals of the 17 SDGs. One of the big ones the private sector is delivering on is number 5 for equal gender diversity, and then on SDG 12, 13 for responsible production, and also on climate mitigation. So it's very important that to share this point, the private sector is investing heavily into renewable energy. For example, where I come from, I'm on the board of PIDCO, we use solar and we generate power using waste. That, therefore, the cost of power is less, but the price of the commodities becomes less, and we pass that on to the consumers. So it's not only important that we use green technologies, both the World Bank, IMF, and regional banks are insisting, Jeremy, today for private sector to show progressive metrics on the ESG goals and the sustainability goals. So for you to be able to access finance to expand your business, then you must demonstrate progressive support towards green strategy, green development, and economic sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chris, for your very insightful input. To start us off, Madam Anne, I would like to get your input on how can Kenya design taxation policies that effectively balance raising revenue for public services and maintaining an attractive environment for investors committed to sustainable development. Kindly give us your thoughts on that.
Thank you. And I think, from the faces in the room, having started with you in the morning, I hope we'll continue to receive your energy and that we're not taking the graveyard shift in terms of the panel. But basically, I've had to internalize that question quite a lot. And I think, just to capture your imagination, I want to give you different scenarios in terms of what I have witnessed and what we see in terms of practical terms before even coming into what can be done about it. So the first one being, imagine startup one coming into, pitching the idea, and, startup one does really well in its first year, has probably gone ahead to really capture an area or an industry or a sector that has been long neglected, from a Kenyan perspective, and therefore there's need for which they then meet demand. But very soon thereafter, the startup folds and leaves the country. And I would say that is the, or just, if it was in country, basically you'd have that folding up and going away happening in under 2 years. That is scenario one, real, and happens a lot, and we see so many of those. Then we have scenario two in terms of startups that thrive for 3 to 5 years, continue to thrive in such a way that is astronomical and even sometimes mind-boggling. I've had clients who, when they came, when I started off with them, couldn't afford to pay me fees, were backpacking, and just all they had was an idea, knocked on very many doors. And within a very short time, their business gets the interest of a funder or a financier or an investor, where they, the person understands what they need and they synergize. And so within a very short time, you find an accelerated growth towards such a startup. And within a 3 to 5 year period, they've moved from, in tax terms, if I'm just talking, from a tax perspective, they'd move from the station. Yes, so, if you ever have trouble with KRA, you'll know what the station means. That's really when you're at a very basic level and dealing with, a particular tax office. Or from there, they move very quickly to the medium taxpayer's office. You have to have a certain threshold in terms of turnover to be within that office. And within that 5 year space, you then find them in the large taxpayer's office. We have very many real cases where startups have just gone platinum in terms of ideas, properly funded and properly synergized. And then scenario 3 that I'd like to paint is where you have, an entire sector coming under siege for whatever reason, because Kenya is in need of money and doesn't care how it's going to get that money. So you find investors being highly stressed, highly shaken, highly harassed, and they then choose to fold. And the ripple effect of such folding, depending on the level at which it plays at. So assuming that it's a sector-wide investment fold, it has real knock-on effects to the ground. So you find employment disappears. You find even those that were funding the opportunities nothing to fund anymore. You find money and glut, stuck, just stuck scenarios, just because we do not have sight of the bigger picture as a country in very, very many ways. So if you ask me, how, can Kenya design its taxation policies, I'll tell you, we need to go back to the basics. The basics. So we need to start from the point where we actually understand what works for us as Kenyans with our very peculiar habits, which, by the way, I've learned a lot from my clients. We have very peculiar habits as Kenyans. We need to understand those peculiarities and how do they work for us as a country. How does that then, help us in terms of the taxes that we bring on board and the policies that we create. That's a basic fundamental. Secondly, we need to understand why are we where we are today and what do we have to our advantage. One of the things that very many of my clients have done and love about Kenya is the highly educated workforce. So over time, we've really, really spent time developing skill sets and teaching everybody really, really service-based. Empowering our people from a services-based perspective. But what are we pushing in terms of policies, in terms of economic policies? Still agriculture, still, the very old things that have been there forever. Why aren't we taking advantage of services, for example, as an area where we generally can get quick wins and make it fly? Why are our policies so old school? They need to change. Also, we need to listen to what investors have to say about this entire thing. Before you shape a policy for somebody who's coming in, listen to what their pain points have been in terms of their stories. And a lot of those stories are captured in the associations. The member associations will tell you everything they've been through. It's a lot in terms of the data that they have, the narratives that they have. And guess what? When you listen long enough, it's the same stories repeated over and over and over again. So there's something that we're not doing. We just don't listen as a country. And I think the fourth one is, now what is the biggest thing around? Data. Yeah? Who is the biggest collector of that data? Government. Government has so much access to so much data. They will know why something is failing before it even begins to fail. So why aren't we taking advantage of data to inform our taxation policy, shaping? Very, very important, because we can learn to address a lot of things within that cycle. So I'll pause there. But yeah, that's where I am right now. Those are the things I'm thinking through.
Okay, thank you very much, Anne. That was quite insightful, and we need to start from the basics, as she has said. Maybe just to prompt Harman's mind a little bit, coming from the legal perspective, what do you think, how can Kenya balance the need for progressive taxation to fund climate initiatives with the risk of alienating investors who prioritize cost efficiency and profitability?
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. As my co-panelists have clearly said, doing business today, everyone is asking the question, what is your ESG policy? As an institution, as a corporate, as a government, what policy do you have in place? What kind of carbon footprint are you leaving behind as you do or you go around your business? And each of us, from government to private sector, has a role to play in that process. Now, there are two perspectives to it. One, as a legal practitioner, we are moving into the new and emerging areas of legal practice, and currently ESG is one of them. So that if I am advising a client on mergers and acquisition or capital venture, or just a way of getting financing for a project, I need to be alive to this and perhaps ask such questions as to what exactly this client is putting in place to ensure that at the end of the day, the business that they're doing is ESG compliant. Number two, I am an arbitrator, and in the arbitration world, one of those biggest issues that we're dealing with currently is arbitration or commercial arbitration largely in the ESG era. And I'm a member of the African Arbitration Association, and we had a conference last year in Cameroon where the main conversation was on ESG. And the question is, what is the law or the lawyers doing, and what are we as arbitrators doing to contribute to this conversation? And many countries are now trying to become ESG compliant, because if we are ESG compliant, it means that we are going to attract more investments, and the more investments that we attract, as an arbitrator, I know that Kenya, being a seat of arbitration or an appointing authority, because we have the Nairobi International Center for Arbitration, if Kenya is compliant, then more investors will choose Kenya as a seat of the arbitration. And that means that me as an arbitrator on the panel of the Nairobi Center will have an opportunity to deal with big international arbitrations that touch on environment. But beyond that, beyond Kenya being compliant, I, as an individual, as a legal practitioner, as an arbitrator, what contribution am I making, and what preparation am I having, so that at the time when that happens, then I have the capacity to contribute at that level. Number two is government itself, and the biggest thing on that is really government policies to ensure that we encourage green energy. So we have, for instance, clients who are trying to make their mark in agribusiness, for instance. And when you talk to the clients and they tell you that there is a lot of environmental difficulties within the government itself, so that they are asking for certain incentives, be it tax incentives, be it ensuring that when you go to a bank for a loan, then we have what we call green banking, or we have green insurance. Like in certain economies, they encourage the financial sector to come up with certain specially developed products for those who are in the industry, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's in agribusiness, whether it's in transport, but they come and show that this is our ESG policy and this is how we are contributing to it. Then the government has already put in place certain incentives to ensure that when I'm taking a loan for a business or for purposes of manufacturing, and I've shown that I'm actually ESG compliant, then there are certain incentives. When it comes to taxes, there are also countries that ensure that as long as you can show that you are ESG compliant, you have policies in place, and that you're following them and you're contributing to the green economy, then you will have certain tax incentives that eventually ensures that you will be encouraged to keep on that path. It's true that ESG is important, but it's also true that sometimes it gets very expensive to be compliant, because when others are getting cheap energy, which eventually then become very harmful to the environment, you go the extra mile to ensure that whatever you do saves the environment. And so it is in the government's interest, and the government, it's the government's obligation to ensure that they encourage such kind of practices. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Herman. My next question would be for Winnie. Looking ahead, how can Kenya design taxation policies that meet revenue needs while incentivizing companies to achieve more substantial ESG outcomes, fostering investor confidence in a green financed future? Kindly, what are your thoughts on this?
Thank you so much. Before I answer your question, let me just mention that Kenya is one of the top 20 countries that are considered at a very high risk of climate change. And so this conversation is very relevant to us at this point. The question is how can we foster investor confidence? Right now, you see Kenya, we are in a very bad state where even if you want to start any other business, you ask yourself, can I really make any money from that? And the public finance is also shrinking. There's not enough money for the government to really invest in green financing. But we have several things or several policies that the government can implement. And I want to say that as Kenya, we are very good in policy making, but practicing is the problem. We have very good documents that if we were to follow as Kenyans or as government, we'll be high, we'll be many steps ahead of other countries. One of the policies that I can talk about is called tax breaks. My colleague has mentioned that we have startups who are trying to come up with the innovative ways of doing their businesses using green energy. But do we give them enough time to grow and flourish before we start taxing them? That is the question. From where I sit as a person who works in social accountability, do we give them time so that they grow before they're given the taxes? So tax breaks is very important. It's also in our policy document as a country, but do we actualize it? Do we practice it? Let me mention as well that taxation in Kenya simply requires transparency. I think one of the problems we have is how the money is utilized. As a business or as an investor, if I invest in Kenya and I'm paying tax, I need to see that tax translating to something that benefits me. For instance, we can have good roads. If I've been invested in Kenya and I'm transporting my goods, do I have the good roads? So what we are talking about here is about the transparency in our taxation policies. It's about the predictability of our taxation. Our taxation of the our taxation policies should be very transparent, should be inclusive. Are the investors involved when we are formulating these policies? So that the Kenyan government, we can listen to their concerns. We can listen to some of the things that they think that are going to hinder them. As an investor, I'm the one who understands where this tax is going to push me. I'm the one who understands how this will affect my cash flows. And so it's about involving the stakeholders, the investors in our policy making processes so that they air their concerns and their concerns are addressed in real time. So another thing that I can say is about we need to have progressive taxation. That has been mentioned before, but do we have like a scale, like if I am a small investor, small scale, not that you are very small, but a small scale investor, tax me according to my size. Tax me according to my what? To my size. And again, the investors should be exempted from certain taxes. I have invested in Kenya and just have a few employees. But you see, I have to contribute in so many things. And these things, they affect the cash flows of the investor. So even as we develop policies, we need to make them friendly to our investors so that they have confidence in our economy.
Thank you, Winnie, for that. And just to maybe get a further clarification, especially from the government's perspective. So to Dennis, what principles should maybe guide the government to ensure that fiscal measures aimed at environmental sustainability do not inadvertently erode investor trust in Kenya's economic stability?
So I'll just build on what Winnie and Anne have just said. Number one, Anne mentioned something to do with data. And if you want to continue building investor confidence in this particular country as a green hub for a green economy, then this data has to be managed well, number one. It has to be transparent. For example, if I want to do something to do with improving the well-being of people in the rural areas by supplying improved cooking jikos, does selling cooking jikos mean that it's being used at home? Does not mean that. So, but somebody somewhere will claim that I am selling a clean jiko, so I should be compensated for the reduction in CO2 emissions from that particular jiko. But the jiko is sitting somewhere at home, in a rural home. So the fact that that data is not, it's not, the word I want to use is integrity. The integrity of the data is not strong. Nobody can verify that this jiko is actually being used. So the data that is being collected has to be true, has to be transparent, has to be clear. And I'm glad that, especially in the startup ecosystem, there are those who are very deliberate about it, using Industry 4.0 technologies, such as blockchain. You cannot compromise the integrity of that data, such that if my jiko is in Siaya County, somebody here is able to tell my jiko is being used, and they're able to be compensated for the reduction in emissions wherever they're trading about that. Number two is predictability, as Winnie has just put it. Already saw, as of 1st January, I saw online somewhere, hashtag reject finance bill 2025. Because it is now becoming unpredictable what policies are going to be coming to govern the ecosystem, especially in terms of the green economy. Today, I'm sure BIDCO, the kind of investment they put in their solar system was massive. But solar prices have been coming down globally. This is in terms of all the technology from the panels all the way to the batteries. But a policy will come and say, you know what, let's tax these batteries. You know what, let's tax these panels. So how are we advancing the same agenda? You're giving with this hand, at the same time taking with this hand. But these are the policies that, especially where we sit as the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, we're really trying to inform the government in terms of where is everything lying. I know it's an incentive to drive local manufacturing, especially for things like batteries, but at the same time, we're not yet there. We're not yet there. Give us time and make us be progressive towards it. And then finally is to incorporate interoperable taxonomies in terms of when I use a certain term here in Kenya, is it still being recognized, let's say, in Europe? If I say that the carbon footprint of my product here in Kenya, is it being recognized in the European market? So there are some policies that are coming on board, especially now, for example, in Europe, there's something that they're calling the carbon border adjustment mechanism that basically is going to be restricting items of a certain carbon footprint getting into their market. So how are we rating ourselves as a country? So number one is the regulation around them. You'll find something like the Climate Change Act, carbon market regulations. There are some schedules that are not yet complete. So we cannot even say that my product has this level of carbon footprint, yet it's not defined in the law. So when I go outside there, and I was told that if I produce my product sustainably, I'll be able to access a better market out there. But when I reach there, I'm told, no, it does not meet a certain standard. So what is the standard? So the terminologies that are used both locally and internationally should align. Us as a country, even the regulations that we are developing should align to those markets, because this is one of the biggest things that is driving local production. So these are some of the few principles I think government could adopt to ensure that investor confidence that is not eroded in our country, rather that it attracts that investor confidence. Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Dennis. To Mr. Chris Diaz, a key point in today's discussion is the concern that proposed taxes such as the eco-levy could hurt green energy and eco-friendly industries by making them more expensive. And you'll find that so many of this green energy is funded by private sectors. So how can the government collaborate with private sector stakeholders to design tax frameworks that support environmental sustainability while preserving a competitive investment landscape?
Very good question. First and foremost, the reason I came here is your president invited me to come and contribute. To answer that question in terms of competitive landscape, the eco-levy tax, and going forward, a lot of the future of Kenya, a lot of the future of the world is in young people. So to make this answer from my perspective, or my opinion, impactful, is leaders like all of you need to be involved heavily in participation and deliberations with the private sector. The private sector is one of the biggest success factors for Kenya. A number of the large corporates came to see me when the eco-levy was proposed. Myself, I spoke to the president and to various arms of government that the eco-levy, it's going to be very hard on manufacturers, because the manufacturers are the biggest employers in this country. If you look at the industry players, they create entrepreneurship. Some of you will be employed, some of you will be entrepreneurs. So laws that come in and don't allow what Winnie was saying on the growth strategy, the private sector look for other markets in other countries where it is favorable to invest and get better return on investment. So young leaders like yourself are also employed and given good packages and good salaries in the private sector. So I'm proud to say that the private sector also pays a lot of taxes to the government. So how do we ensure that the policy and the decision making is that the private sector has to be heavily involved? And we do this through bodies like the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, through student bodies like yourselves, the Law Society of Kenya, the Kenya Private Sector, among other international private sector bodies, including countries and investors. So for me, mine is to say that the competitive landscape, our products and services must be well priced and affordable, and the cost of living is very high. For example, if you look at the manufacturers today, the cost of power relative to other countries across the continent, our cost of power is still high. So unless the government looks at the whole value chain, look at value addition, look at backward integration, look at how much entrepreneurship is being created by the private sector. If you're not employed, you'll end up being an entrepreneur. So it's very important that the government engages and takes a longer deliberation to understand the growth of the economy, the economic transformation that is done by private sector. And I'm grateful to be here, because what I can say on behalf of private sector, they're very keen to see each one of you progress, each one of you to be top talent. Kenya has amazing talent. So how do we get this talent? Is we come to universities and we look and we talk to prof there, and we talk to, and the private sector is looking to absorb leaders from the universities and employ them. So it's very important that in such discussions, just be reassured the private sector wants a competitive landscape, wants a friendly tax policy, but also would like to see young people, not only highly educated, but to be recruited in the private sector. Thank you.
Precisely so. So I'd like to engage our audience a little bit. So if there are any questions as far as we have reached, please feel free to raise your hand. Yes, Prof.
Thank you so much. So because I'm young and talented, Chris, you are getting my job applications. I would like to, I have one comment on the tax breaks. Isn't it that we apply those tax breaks in the areas we should not apply them, and we do not generate funds to support the startups? So I'll give you an example. We have tax holidays, 10 years, in export processing zones for a very low old school. Who said old school? Old school, yeah. For a very low value addition old school activities, namely importing fabrics from India and Bangladesh, stitching them and exporting them under AGOA to United States, so that the manufacturers from there can bypass the high tariffs. So this is one thing. So we are there are also so-called incentives, yeah, which is cheap energy, which basically means that me, a poor lecturer, yeah, has to subsidize big enterprises in the export processing zones. So I'm quite shocked because I know all of that, and now I'm hearing that startups, young entrepreneurs, yeah, who have the ideas, have to pay full taxes. Why, you know, why the giants, mostly foreign companies, not only but mostly, yeah, engaging this type of activities are being given tax holidays. I am personally outraged about this, so perhaps you can comment on this. You share my rage. And then I have a question to Anne, because you said something, and I'm very interested. So, what peculiar habits? Number one, if you can just name two, out of interest, and the stories that are being told over and over again. If we also can have one or two. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof, for that. Any other question? Okay.
Okay, my name is Alex. My question is, do we as a country reward innovation? Because the reason why I ask this is because a while back we had there was a guy who was arrested after flying. He made an aircraft out of a motorcycle engine, and he flew it for a while. Then when he landed, the first thing that was done, he was arrested. I still don't know where he went. But that shows, what does that show about us as a government, as the private sector? How do we reward innovation within our country? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I think I'll now hand over to the panel. Oh, two more. Okay.
Oh, okay. My name is Wandia, and as per the discussion, there's a lot of heavy rather connotation to investors. What about the local communities in that particular area where these manufacturing industries are meant to be situated? Because under investor law, it seems to, or rather it does protect mostly the interest of the investor. It looks to see, okay, what can we do for them to be attracted to us as a country? But again, questions come up as to what about the local communities serving in that particular area? As Prof has commented, the costs of energy are being borne by the consumers, by the local communities who are us. Therefore, what steps should be taken to ensure that there is a balance between the investor, whatever the investor rights or rather needs may be, and also the needs of the local communities around the areas that the investors seek to invest.
Thank you, Andia. And the final question.
The last question. My name is Martin Matthew, a law student at African Nazarene University, a participant of this amazing competition. How can a state that is already experiencing the severe impacts of climate change effectively respond? And what role should it take when overwhelmed by climate-related challenges? Should it broaden the tax base? And if so, how can it balance with economic growth? Because there might be overlaps of priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll now hand over to the panel in no particular order. Okay.
I would give Madam Anne the first opportunity, as the first question was directed to her.
Okay, so I think the first question may have been directed to Winnie and I, but I can kick us off. In terms of, preferential tax areas, which is, what Prof has mentioned, like the economic processing zones, export processing zones, Kenya went further to even introduce the special economic zones. So whilst the EPZs have been there, I think, from the early 1990s, the SEZs are very new. And so, because I think the law came into effect in 2016. So I've had a first-hand seat in seeing how the preferential tax regimes morph, the considerations that go into them, and the various pros and cons, I would say, that come from those. So if we take the SEZs, which are very, they're meant to be all-encompassing, very broad, very umbrella-like. In fact, the government intends to absorb the EPZs into the SEZs. That is cabinet's intention. And I think they've put out a few cabinet memos that have crystallized that over the last year. And so when the EPZs come into the fold of the SEZs, the questions will be, okay, the harmonization of rates, harmonization of incentivizations, breaks, etc., which is already ongoing. So if we take into account what government is looking to achieve with these areas, they are intended to first attract investment. So the question around this has been, what forms of investment is it intended to attract, and what thresholds are in place? When I talk about thresholds, that's not an area that's really been monitored historically, but government is currently very, very keen in ensuring that if you're going into one of the preferential tax areas, then you have to bring in what they call significant investment. Significant investment is undefined currently. It's supposed to be, in their policies. But what I've seen on the ground is they do know what they mean. For example, I've had clients who want to shift from the domestic regime into the SEZs because of the lower, tax incentivizations. And, when we go to the authorities, they say, no, you've been operating perfectly normally, unless you can give us a very good commercial reason for why you're looking to move, and also demonstrate to us that you're going to have a very significant influx of FDI. Yeah, so the foreign direct investment, they don't permit. Number two, they are now monitoring employment levels. And so once you make a case to go into the preferential tax areas, I think the EPZs have been very successful in creating, hundreds of thousands of jobs, yeah, historically. They are not high-end jobs, they are low-end jobs, yes. However, they keep things moving, right? When it comes to the SEZs, their intention is to create a very different level of employment, a much higher caliber. In fact, they've gone down to the level of looking at what is the, are your employees going to be unskilled? Are they semi-skilled? Are they skilled? Are they, what levels of expatriate employees are you bringing in? Are they highly skilled? Within what time frame are they going to skills transfer to local people? And they are monitoring that on a quarterly basis. So I have clients who are bearing the brunt of this, being front runners into that area, where they have to report quarterly, they have to report half yearly more extensively, and at the end of the year, they are their licenses are renewed on an annual basis, as it is today, and those questions are very hot questions. So if you did not make progress over the year in either the investment thresholds, the employment thresholds, there's one more that they look at, one additional parameter which is keeping my brain right now, but they look at all those bits, and if you're not meeting those categories, then they do not renew the license. And that is something that I've seen happen practically, and is something that is happening. And it's coming from the Kenya Revenue Authority simply saying, we cannot have business as usual, i.e., erosion, they call it, erosion of taxes from the main, from the main pot. So if a business was going to do well in the ordinary regime, they will not allow a crossover, they will not allow added incentivizations. So these areas are intended for really big players, and that's, I think, how they are currently implementing. When it comes to peculiarities, I'll give two. One being, and I've taken both of them from, one specific client, who's very big on ground reading of people, of the Kenyan people. And one of them is for asset financed products. If you give Kenyans the option of paying daily, weekly, or monthly, Kenyans opt to pay daily in multiple transactions per day. So assuming someone is supposed to pay back 100 bob, they would rather pay little bits of 10 bob, 10 bob, 10 bob, 10 bob, 10 bob, 10 bob to accumulate their 100 bob through multiple transactions, which then accumulate to like 10 transactions in that particular day. It's for like 1,000 shillings, 1,000 shilling payments. They keep at the 100 in order to come under the fees, the transaction fees for the mobile transaction that would be happening at that point. So that's one thing, because whenever the Revenue Authority asks for statements, their M-Pesa statements upon audit, these particular financiers have a very, very difficult time. They have millions of transactions per month because of our peculiar habits as Kenyans. The second one is how we love phones. And we love phones that that connect to the internet. And so I've got a client whose portfolio has grown in leaps and bounds over a 2-year period because of our love for phones that access the internet. And so on average, in a country where we are saying, we are very broke, we are very, 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 very broke, as a people will spend between, roughly around 15,000 shillings on a phone that they are accessing finance to. So it's very interesting how, the things that make us tick as a people. And I think last year when there was the Gen Z movement, that number just grew unbelievably. Everybody wanted to be on X. Everybody wanted to, have something to say. And it's not in the main towns, it's across the entire country. Yeah. So I hope those two fit.
Thank you, Anne. Second question on, I think, do we reward innovation? Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I'll just pick on that one. It's a very good question because from private investors and private sector, the lady, my good friend there, spoke about how do you engage with the communities. So I just want to give an example. For example, East African breweries, Bidco, Sasini, some of the larger investors and manufacturers, they give out contract farming opportunities to the community. Now, for breweries, it'll be sorghum, barley. For Bidco, soya, sunflower, maize, and for Sasini will be macadamia, avocado, among others. So Kenya is a strong agribusiness economy, and this is the sustainable contracts that will be with entrepreneurs for a long time. It's not a short term. So these are opportunities where the communities can benefit from revenue generation, but also from agribusiness and from value addition, which are really some outstanding ways of creating entrepreneurship for the young people. Then the other thing that the investors and the private sector does is give the young people opportunities, for example, to be distributors, to be part of the ecosystem, to be part of the transport facilitators and so forth. So you will find the investors always engaging the communities. The second one, which I may touch, and my friend there talked about, is innovation. So most of the universities have incubation centers, and the private sector are very keen in partnering with universities so that they can start the innovation centers across the 47 counties. One great innovation that we must think about as you talk about the aviation business, and my background from the aviation business, is the use of drones, the last mile deliveries. It's not only for Kenya, for the rest of the world. Everybody wants their products with the digital fintech and payments of M-Pesa. It becomes easier to drop your groceries and your shopping to your house. So right now there are drone companies that are training young people to be drone pilots. I'm not saying you change your career, but what I'm trying to say, the last mile business is going to be very big for Kenya. So that innovation of delivering to home delivery, where people going less to the shopping malls, is happening in a big way across Kenya and across Africa. So how does this innovation of last mile delivery, including setting up distribution and logistical companies, embracing laws and legal leadership into those investments so that you create solutions for the private sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Winnie, you had something? Okay. Dennis, the person.
Okay. Just wanted also to make some responses. Yes, actually, there is a lot of reward in innovation. I'm a beneficiary of actually one of the incubation centers stationed in KU. So I have seen startups come from zero to something big, as astronomical growth. But I will speak in the context especially of our local manufacturers. At the Center for Energy Efficiency and Conservation, we run a program known as the Energy Management Award, which has been running for 20 years through a public-private partnership with the government, the Ministry of Energy. And in one of these awards, actually there's an award called the Young Innovators Award. Somebody has come up with solutions that has actually led to the increased sustainable manufacturing practices of an organization. And I'll give an example with one particular award winner who was actually an Atachi, 5th year student. She was attached at a local beverage manufacturing organization, and she came up with an innovation of how to reduce the number of times the production line stops that leads to wastage of water. So they were able to quantify how much water was reduced due to this innovation, and because of that, her attachment was extended beyond her graduation, and she even became an employee in that organization. So yes, innovation is actually rewarded in this country. With respect to communities, I'm glad Herman really mentioned the issues of ESG, and local manufacturers are really keen on it. ESG basically stands for environment, social, and governance. So there's the environment aspect of it, there's the social bit of it, and it's anchored on 3 key pillars. Number 1 is the people. So if you're setting up a setup for manufacturing or business, how are you impacting the people in the organization, in the community around? That metric has to be taken. How are you impacting the local environment? How are your governance structures? Is there issues of some petty cash has to go through the MD? Those are issues on governance. But that's the first pillar. The second pillar is on sustainability, in terms of how you're impacting the environment. And the last one is on resilience. How quickly are you agile in changing your tact in time of a catastrophe? So there's a question that was asked about how we respond as a country that is burdened with the issues of climate change, do we increase the tax base? There are innovative ways of increasing the tax base. Number one is these ESG metrics. It is going to punish you from the market side, and also locally, the policies may also decide to punish you. If Kenya decided to introduce something like a carbon tax, like South Africa, that would really push us into actually transitioning faster. But are we ready for that? No. If there is a reward, the incentives that are being talked about, that is beyond tax breaks. Because I remember one particular aspect was on the regulations on energy efficiency. That, okay, I have reached this level of energy consumption. What reward is there? Number one is the monetary reward. I reduced my costs. But there has to be another one. And what I just mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, the good laws which we never use, to be honest, there's a particular law that has been at the CS's desk for the last 5 years. It's draft, it's complete, it's very good for manufacturers, but it's not being gazetted. So with such issues not being addressed, we are not able to take advantage of other areas to broaden our tax base rather than going to tax production. If you tax production, consumption is going to be expensive. We actually did an analysis at CAM and we realized last year alone with the increased fuel prices, government lost revenue in tax. Not because more EVs are coming into the market, no, but less people were using the road. Less fuel was being consumed. But if they're not making decisions based on facts, data that is actually being collected on the ground and informing their decisions, then we'll always be in this cycle of talking the same things 10 years ago, 10 years to come. Yeah.
Thank you, Dennis, for that. And just before I let you go, yourself, Chris, and I think Herman have spoken about ESGs. And looking from the perspective of ESGs, you find that most organizations or companies incorporate ESG's goals in their corporate social and responsibility taglines rather than a main priority in the organizations. Do you think from your perspectives that can change and that they can incorporate ESGs as one of their main priority goals instead of just treating it as a CSR project?
Absolutely. Actually, companies are very deliberate about it. At CAM, we started an ESG program late last year, but we have a challenge on identifying the ESG readiness of an organization. Like, where are you at in your journey? So we are also really trying to co-create these programs with those who are ahead, those who are intentional about getting ahead in terms of improving the ESG metrics, so that we can come up with something that is highly localized. Of course, there's the issue of awareness, and that's actually why we started the program, just to help people be more aware about the ESG metrics, considering most people are actually just treating it as a CSR. So we're also trying to sensitize the players in the space that ESG is not CSR. ESG is beyond that, and it's bigger. You have to be more intentional. But I'll let maybe Herman contribute more on it.
Thank you. ESG definitely is beyond CSR, and we have moved beyond the point where an organization would simply have a tagline on CSR and say, we are big on CSR, and what do you do about CSR? Because when it comes to ESG, there are even audits on an institution or a company to see your level of compliance with ESG, so that a company would then come up with a specific policy on ESG. And so when we talk about, I think there was a question about us talking about investors and what is the place of the local community or indigenous people. A company that has proper ESG policy that they are following would definitely have the place of the local community, and how they respond to the needs of the local community would form part of their ESG policy. So ESG policy is important, and every institution, every company, be it private or whichever form, needs to have it. I'm not sure whether Kenyatta University has one. But I have to say that even us as a law firm, we have an ESG policy. So it's important that we go that direction, because the days of just CSR statement and moving on from there is long past. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As we wrap up, I would like to invite each of our panelists in a brief minute to give us their final thoughts. What is one key takeaway or action point you would like our audience to leave with?
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I was asking if I'm the first. Yeah, so final thoughts. First, let me re-emphasize, what I said in my opening remarks today at the opening ceremony, that, you're the future. And if you keep a lot of these things boxed in or hidden in terms of your gifts, your talents, your thoughts, your ideas, then nobody really, they'll remain exactly that. Somebody else is going to come along from wherever else in the world and implement those things or voice them. They'll look brilliant, yet you had the idea and you had the answer to a lot of those things. So keep putting your thoughts, your ideas out there through forums such as this, participate, because out of that is where even we, hear from you and we learn, and we then go ahead and, we talk to people in policy, and we are then able to shape a lot of the things that, that matter in a country like ours. Unlike a lot of the gloom and doom that circulates everywhere, and especially in this era where we wake up, we are hit with taxes left, right, and center. I even stopped keeping count. Is it AHL? Is it SHASHIF? Is it NSSF that's increased? What is going on? It's a lot. And in the landscape that we're in, it's very easy to look at it from a gloom and doom perspective, and to look at it in terms of our country is really stuck and not going to go anywhere. And unlike many people who choose to believe that, I am not a believer in that. Because on the other side, I get sight of very many things that are working through the trenches, but they are working nonetheless. They could definitely work better, could definitely work more efficiently, and could definitely grow faster than they are currently growing. But it's a season. I like to think of things as seasonal. We will take the lessons that we're learning through this season, and we will ensure that in the future, through you, through those that come after you, through even us in our generation and the generations that follow us, we will definitely ensure that we don't repeat a lot of the mistakes that we are seeing being made. We are seeing the harm that it does on so many levels in terms of our society, and in terms of our economy. But in terms of, does the future look great for Kenya? I've been joking about it, at work, but it's not a joke that from, I think, November, we've had people sleep in the office many, many nights until now because of the overload of investor confidence that's there. There's so much money being directed this way. It's unbelievable. And you cannot tell me that that is happening for a country that is doomed to fail. Yeah, so there's a lot of hope from very many other quarters. I think when we're on the ground, sometimes we just don't feel it. We don't see it because we're just surviving. But the reality is, and it's not just us. There are very, very many practitioners, professionals that are very, very busy in this season. Now, unfortunately, because of our cyclical election, madness, it is anticipated, all these hullabaloo is because everybody is expecting this to be the productive year, 2026 to be productive, and then a lull and a slump in 2027 as we elect our leaders in that year. So until we get to shape up some of those things that become cyclical and affect us, every 5-year cycle, why should investors predict that something is going to hit us and make our economy dead for a year, and then we reignite it with so much energy thereafter? So I think there's a lot happening. Put your mindsets in the right place. Look at your lane. I like to tell those that work with me, choose your lane, run your race, and run it excellently. That's all you can do for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Winnie?
I want to mention something. Just forgive me. There's a question that has not been answered on the other side. There's a participant who was concerned that do we have to increase the tax base in order to achieve climate sustainability? And I would like to say that there are other innovative ways to do that. We know that as a country, the government of Kenya sometimes gives treasury bonds to raise funds to finance the budget. In some countries also, they have something called blue bonds, where investors come and they put money, and that money is only meant to address issues of marine protection. And through that, the investors get their interest, but again, you find that the marine is protected and more money is accumulated to grow the economy. And another one, that is a good example in Seychelles. There is also in Mexico, they are also doing something called Quintana Roo Reef parametric insurance. So in this, you find that there's a trust, a kitty, where the private investors and the public government, they put money together, so that if there is a very high level of hurricane that destroys the coral reef, the local communities they're engaged to prepare or to repair the coral reef immediately within 1 week, and then they're paid. So it is a plus to the economy, it's a plus to the investors along the coastal lines, and it's a plus to the local communities, because they get to earn some money for their livelihood. So I would like to say that there are other ways. So just as Madam has said, that we should not lose hope. Our economy is stable, only that we need to practice some of the policies. Some of the things you've heard me mention are enshrined, or they have been developed in, there's a document currently in Kenya called the Green Financing Framework. It's in the Ministry of Treasury. So it means that there are experts already in the Ministry of Treasury who understands some of the alternative ways of raising income and revenues, so that Kenya is not burdened with taxes. Finally, let me say that as a parting shot, attaining climate sustainability will help us as a country, because you realize that Kenya, we are blessed with resources. So if we can invest in climate sustainability, it means we'll have more jobs. Our future will be sure, because we'll not be having worries of climate change. And even the young people will have confidence in our country. So that means that we can manage it with good taxes policies. We can manage climate sustainability, and it's a call. It's a call to the Kenyan government that we practice even some of the things that are enshrined in there's a document called the Energy Investment Plan 2030 to 2050 that promises 500,000 jobs for the youth. So it's something we can push for as young people, as brilliant minds, so that we have a climate sustainable country.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mine are two as we come to a close. One is that as we discuss green economy, one of the biggest concerns and considerations is transparency and accountability. And I believe that this conference is dealing with that as one of the issues. I once advised a client who wanted to invest in renewable energy through waste that we have, that we collect in this country in different cities. So they wanted to recycle waste. And this client came from Turkey, and they wanted to negotiate with the county government. They said, we want to start with 2 counties as a pilot project, so that at the end of it, we can then spread it across the country. And when they came, they had 2 first meetings with 2 governors, and they left. They never came back. And when we followed up, of course, because for us that was business, what happened? Beyond the fact that it was an issue that was going to help the country in us investing in renewable energy, this was legal fee. And the client told us that in those 2 meetings, 2 different governors, the response was the same. What is in it for me? And the moment the answer was not what was expected, there was no goodwill. And so it was not possible to continue. So it's very important that we look at it from the perspective of accountability and transparency for the investor confidence, for them to come and invest in renewable energy. Number 2, and lastly for me, when we talk about green economy, at the center of green economy is innovation. And innovation in this era of technology is done at this level where you guys are. The young people are the ones who are involved in the biggest innovation that we have. And so as we have people in the tech sector, those who are in other areas and sectors studying innovation and how to create different solutions to the problems that we have, as lawyers, we are also not left behind. So through research, we can also come up with innovative solutions, because a lot of times the law lags behind. So people innovate, and then we realize that something has happened, and so we need the law to regulate that sector. Isn't it possible for us to also continually come up with new ideas to predict where innovation is headed, so that even as lawyers, we already have solutions at the point when we are moving towards the right direction. And you guys are at the center of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hama.
Okay, for me, I just want to say the green economy is alive, kicking and well, and you're the people to drive that economy. If you take a moment and think about an incident that happened, I don't know whether it was last year or last year, but one about an issue with a tea brand that had human rights issues. It was almost cancelled, right? So this generation, the Generation Z, are very conscious about what they are consuming. It's not just about the tea. How was this tea grown? Who grew this tea? How was it transported? Were there, see the way at the end of the movie, no animals were hurt in the production of this movie. These products will have to have something like that. That bottle of plastic you have there, how much recycled plastic is going into it? And you'll be conscious about it. You'll be saying, I'm not drinking this brand, I'm drinking this brand. So it's alive and well. So please be hopeful. The future is not bleak. To be honest, the only people who can sustain that growth and just have that vision come to life is you. So that's just my encouragement for you. And I'll leave you with something that I learned about the 7 habits of highly effective people. There are 2 circles. There's a circle of influence and the circle of concern. The circle of concern are those things you cannot influence. The laws, who is drafting the policies, those are things you may not be able to influence. But there are those things you can do as yourself. And as Haman has said, the law will just follow. If they are seeing that people are recycling a lot of plastics, let's develop a policy around that. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. And lastly, Chris.
So thank you very much. First, my challenge to all of you is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? So from leadership, I speak from the investors and from the private sector. What I can reassure you, the private sector will empower leaders, young leaders, and the private sector will continue to invest in Kenya. The Kenyan economy is resilient, and we have a very strong market. But one of the areas that I would like young leaders like you, as you develop and you go into practice and you go into the private sector and you go to become entrepreneurs, keep in mind the African Continental Trade Agreement is one of the areas where we have the greatest opportunity, especially for leaders like you. The intra-Africa trade is still working on single digits, while the European markets and the Asian markets are trading among themselves at double digits. So both the laws, the framework, sustainability, the growth of manufacturing. Manufacturing is about 6 or 7% of GDP. Manufacturers are going to invest to make the contribution to around 15% of GDP. So what I can reassure you that a lot of the industries, the fintech, energy, manufacturers, will continue to be big employers and will continue to make many of you entrepreneurs. So the glass is half full, and we have to be innovative and be consistent to support the young leaders coming into private sector. Like I started this discussion, private sector drives 80% of the GDP. So remember, I speak on behalf of private sector leaders. We welcome you, and we want you to work hard. We want you to get good results and come and talk to us, and we'll definitely want to employ the best of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. And that brings us to the end of our panel discussion today. A round of applause to our panelists. I shall now hand over to Hamisi.
So we can also give a round of applause for our very able moderators, Jeremy and Aisha. Now, at this point, I would like to invite Professor Millet to gift our panelists. Okay, so I hope our photographers are on set. So we'll start with Chris Diaz, Mr. Chris Diaz. Okay, next we'll have Miss Anne Mubia. We'll have Mr. Haman Omiti go next. Miss Winnie Ogutu will follow. And last but not least, Mr. Dennis Karaoke. Let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much, Professor Millet. I believe you have been empowered. I believe you have gotten the, the insights that they had. Okay, so as Jeremy has said, that is the end of that second panel. We meet again tomorrow, where we'll be having another panel discussion, which will be starting at 9 a.m., right? Yes, 9 a.m. Please ensure that you come with a friend so that at least they get, the knowledge that you're also receiving today. Yeah, so.
Also, if it's not too much to ask, Jeremy and I are requesting a photo with our panelists.
Okay, great. We can give them a clap as they have a photo. And Professor Millet, I think you can join in. So another reminder, so tomorrow we'll be hosting Miss Faith Othiambo the president of the Law Society of Kenya, who will be part of that panel discussion. So I believe you don't want to miss it. So make sure you're there. Okay. Okay, so you are free to leave at your own pleasure. And thank you so much for coming.